Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers traffic stops, reasonable suspicion, and vehicle searches, and is brought to us by Ricky Pouncel's channel. Be sure to check out the description below and give them the credit that they deserve. On the evening of January 12th, 2023, Officer Jack Lowry of the Bloomington Police Department pulled over area resident Ricky Pouncel while he was driving in the city of Bloomington, Minnesota on his way home from the gym. The interaction that followed was captured on Officer Lowry's body camera.
Hey man, how's it going? Do you have your driver's license, proof of insurance? I got you. The reason why I stopped you, I just saw you on the center lane there for a little bit. I want to make sure you don't get me driving.
I'm watching traffic. We have people with no headlights past me.
Officer Lowry informs Mr. Pouncel that he stopped him because he saw him, quote, on the center lane, and later indicated in his police report that Mr. Pouncel was stopped for a, quote, lane violation and for driving 53 miles per hour when the speed limit was 60. Under section 169.15 of the Minnesota statutes, quote, no person shall drive a motor vehicle at such a slow speed as to impede or block the normal and reasonable movement of traffic, except when reduced speed is necessary for safe operation or in compliance with law, or except when the vehicle is temporarily unable to maintain a greater speed due to a combination of the weight of the vehicle and the grade of the highway. Given the limited number of drivers on the road, Officer Lowry could not reasonably believe that Mr. Pouncel was violating this statute by driving 5 to 7 miles below the speed limit, as the statute prohibits citizens from driving so slowly that they interfere with the normal traffic flow, not from merely driving below the speed limit. Likewise, even if Mr. Pouncel's speed was somehow impeding traffic, the statute allows drivers to reduce their speed when it is necessary for them to safely operate their vehicles. And Mr. Pouncel would have a strong argument that he was driving slowly to deal with the snowy road conditions. Officer Lowry also claims that he stopped Mr. Pouncel because he was, quote, on the center lane. And although what he means by this statement is not entirely clear, it seems likely that he's claiming that Mr. Pouncel was drifting between lanes. According to subdivision 7 of section 169.18 of the Minnesota statutes, quote, when any roadway has been divided into 2 or more clearly marked lanes for traffic, a vehicle shall be driven as nearly as practicable entirely within a single lane, and shall not be moved from the lane until the driver has first ascertained that the movement can be made with safety. Likewise, as the Supreme Court of Minnesota held in the 1972 case of State versus Alonson that a traffic stop was justified when an officer observed a vehicle weaving within its lane, even when the officer did not believe that the driver violated any traffic laws, because the officer, quote, had a right to stop defendant in order to investigate the cause of the unusual driving. Although it became clear that Officer Lowry was more interested in investigating Mr. Pouncel for potential criminal activity than enforcing the traffic code, the U.S. Supreme Court held in the 1996 case of Wren versus United States that the constitutional reasonableness of a traffic stop does not depend on the actual motivations of the officers involved, effectively authorizing so-called pretextual stops in most situations. Based on the relevant case law, if a court believed Officer Lowry's testimony that Mr. Pouncel was floating between lanes, it is likely that it would also find the initial traffic stop to be constitutionally valid.
Where you headed to tonight? Going home? Your license all valid and everything like that? All good to go, right? With valid license and everything? Okay. Anytime, man. I'll be back.
License status valid.
Rental car, pretty distinct reaction to my presence, and then going like 55 in middle lane, and wasn't really cooperative with me at all. Didn't want to tell me where he was coming, where he was going. There's some luggage in the back seat too.
Just what?
Like a couple bags in the trunk.
Okay.
He didn't seem super cooperative, so I'm just gonna pull him out and try to talk him out here. Ricky, right? All right. Hey, Ricky. I got no intention of writing any ticket. I'm gonna talk to you back here for a quick second. We'll get you out of here. All right? I'm just gonna talk to you back here. I'm asking you to get out of the car. Well, the thing is, I don't really need a reason. I know. No, I don't. I'm badge 363. So I just want to talk to you back here, back to your car. I'll get you all the information in a second, man. 363. Officer Lowry. Do me a favor, can you just come around the front here? Thank you. You just want to go back to my partner, just around the middle of the traffic or anything like that. Hey, I know it's cold out here. You might feel the need to put your hands in your pockets. I'll either ask you to put your hands out of your pockets, or I can either pat you down for your safety.
Pat me down, whatever you want.
Okay. The reason why I'm trying to talk to you out here is because when I tried talking to you the first time, you didn't seem super. Like I tried asking you where you're coming and going, you know? You said you're headed where? Back home?
I'm going home.
And is home in Egan?
No, I have a house over here, man. I mean, all those questions are really not necessary. Period.
Where is your address at home?
I have an address over here.
I'm just over here to do
Well, you can follow me if you want.
I don't want to follow
you. You know,
you.
it's like you're harassing me.
I'm not trying to harass
Yes,
you.
you are. I mean, I haven't did anything. Search me, I haven't did nothing.
I didn't search you. I just patted you
Yes,
down.
you did. You patted me down.
Where are you coming from?
Coming from Lifetime Fitness.
Lifetime Fitness?
Yeah.
What do you do for work?
What do you mean what I do for work? I have my own business.
What's up with the bag? Like workout bag?
Yeah, it's workout bags back there.
Workout bags?
Yeah.
How many bags are there?
I don't know, 3 or 4.
Let me ask you this. Is there anything illegal in the car?
No.
Is there any...
No, it's nothing illegal. It's no guns, none of that. Man, it's cold out here.
I don't know. No marijuana?
No, I don't smoke marijuana.
No cocaine?
No. I don't do drugs.
Methamphetamine?
Dude, I do not do drugs. What's your name?
I'm Officer Lowry.
Officer Lowry. I'm not sure why you're harassing me.
I'm not trying to harass
Yes,
you.
you are.
The reason why-
You have me in the cold.
Can I try to
haven't
explain?
did anything. You got my
Hold on,
license,
let me-
man.
let
It's
me
cold
talk.
as
You can have it
outside.
back. You can have it back.
It's cold
The reason why I'm
outside.
asking you these things is I want to confirm or dispel any possible suspicions that I may have.
I'll have my attorney contact you tomorrow.
Okay, you haven't super cooperated with me, all that stuff.
Bro.
And you don't really want to talk to me. It's fine, but I just want to scratch all these
Okay,
boxes, okay?
scratch all
so there's
the
nothing
boxes.
illegal in the car.
No.
Okay.
Despite informing Mr. Pouncil that he has no intention of writing him a ticket, Officer Lowry orders Mr. Pouncil to step out of the vehicle and asks him a series of questions on the side of the road. Although officers generally have the authority to order drivers and passengers to step out of a vehicle during a traffic stop, courts have also consistently held that officers cannot extend the length of a traffic stop to investigate matters that are unrelated to the initial reason for the stop, absent independent reasonable suspicion of an additional offense. In the 2002 case of State versus Wiegand, the Supreme Court of Minnesota explained that, quote, the scope of a stop must be strictly tied to and justified by the circumstances that rendered the initiation of the investigation permissible. Expansion of the scope of the stop to include investigation of other suspected illegal activity is permissible under the Fourth Amendment only if the officer has reasonable, articulable suspicion of such other illegal activity. Likewise, the U.S. Supreme Court held in the 2015 case of Rodriguez versus United States that, quote, an officer may conduct certain unrelated checks during an otherwise lawful traffic stop, but he may not do so in a way that prolongs the stop absent the reasonable suspicion ordinarily demanded to justify detaining an individual. As the U.S. District Court in Nevada explained in the 2018 case of Stanwood versus Stoltz, quote, Rodriguez indicates that once the mission of a traffic stop is complete, an officer cannot order an individual out of his vehicle. And while Officer Lowry claims that he's questioning Mr. Pouncil in order to confirm or dispel the suspicions he has, it is unlikely that a court would conclude that Officer Lowry's so-called suspicions rose to the level of reasonable suspicion. It is unclear exactly what Officer Lowry found to be suspicious about Mr. Pouncil, but he noted in his police report that there were, quote, multiple criminal indicators, and mentioned to his partner that Mr. Pouncil was not answering his questions as thoroughly as he would have liked, was driving a rental car, and had a few bags in the backseat of the vehicle. As we have discussed many times here on ATA, citizens are generally not required to answer officers' questions or otherwise assist them with their investigations, and refusing to be quote-unquote cooperative when faced with questioning cannot give rise to the reasonable suspicion necessary for a Terry stop. Additionally, in the 2022 case of U.S. versus Fickus, the U.S. District Court in Minnesota determined that, quote, there is nothing inherently suspicious about stowing bags in the passenger side of a car rather than elsewhere in the vehicle, and that, quote, the mere presence of handbags and an athletic bag in the passenger side of a car does not establish reasonable suspicion that justifies the extension of an investigative stop. Now, while Mr. Pouncil's bags were in the back seat, the same principle applies. Finally, although rental cars are commonly used in drug trafficking, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, which has jurisdiction over Minnesota, held in the 1998 case of U.S. versus Beck that there was nothing inherently suspicious in an individual's use of a rental vehicle to travel. Even when taken together, a court would likely conclude that the quote-unquote multiple criminal indicators identified by Officer Lowry were insufficient to provide him with reasonable suspicion, and that he therefore illegally extended the traffic stop when he ordered Mr. Pouncil to step out of the vehicle for further unrelated questioning after resolving the traffic issue.
No what?
No, it's nothing. Dude, I want to. It's cold out here, and you have me out here for no reason. You don't have proper cause. No, you don't.
You keep cutting me off, man. My intention right now is I want to search your car for any to confirm or dispel any suspicion.
What
that I
are
may
you
have.
searching my car?
Hold on.
I'm telling you, no, you can't
You don't
search
want
my
to.
car.
Okay, that's fine. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to call my K9, see if there's going to alert
That's
them.
fine if that's what you want to do,
Okay.
but you're doing it for no reason.
You
I don't have nothing in the car.
Okay.
Nothing.
You have the right now. You can hang out right here on the bumper of my car. You can lay in the back of my seat of my car with the windows down, with the door open, whatever you want.
Dude,
whatever you feel more
just
comfortable
search
with.
the car if that's going to make you happy. I don't care. Can we just get on with this?
Yes, we can. If you're going to give me consent to search your car now, I want to make sure I'm not trying to coerce you into it. I want
All
you to know
I'm
that
saying, it's cold
Yep,
out here. I don't want to be in the car. I can get in the car.
Okay.
You have no reason to detain me.
Okay, so let me get so we're on the same page. You're saying that I have the right to search your car.
Yeah, but you have no reason to detain me because I haven't did anything.
Okay. You have the right to take away your consent anytime. If you don't want me to do it, you don't have to.
I just said yes.
Okay.
If that's what you want to do.
Hang out here with my partner. I don't want to keep you any longer than I have to. We'll get you going, okay?
Will you not tear the whole car up?
Yes, sir.
After initially refusing when Officer Lowry asks for consent to search his vehicle, Mr. Pouncil eventually agrees to allow a search after Officer Lowry threatens to get a canine to sniff outside of the vehicle if he does not consent. As the Eighth Circuit explained in the 2003 case of U.S. versus Brown, quote, "A consensual search does not violate the Fourth Amendment if the consent was voluntarily given without coercion." Similarly, the Minnesota Court of Appeals noted in the 2014 case of Knutson versus Commissioner of Public Safety, quote, "For a search to fall under the consent exception, the state must show by a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant freely and voluntarily consented." The court acknowledged that, quote, "consent that is the product of official intimidation or harassment is not consent at all," while also stating that, quote, "involuntariness of a consent to a police request is not to be inferred simply because the circumstances of the encounter are uncomfortable for the person being questioned," and that, quote, "consent is coerced when a suspect's will has been overborne and his capacity for self-determination critically impaired." However, courts have consistently recognized that consent must be more than mere submission to a claim of lawful authority. In the 1968 case of Bumper versus North Carolina, the Supreme Court held that consent to a search is not effective when it has only been given after the official conducting the search has asserted that they possess a warrant when they actually do not, arguing that prosecutors cannot prove the consent was freely and voluntarily given, quote, "by showing no more than acquiescence to a claim of lawful authority." Although Officer Lowry did not claim to possess a warrant to search, he did inform Mr. Pouncil that if he refused to consent to a search, he would bring a canine unit to sniff the vehicle, even though, as we discussed earlier in this episode, he likely did not have the reasonable suspicion necessary to extend the traffic stop. It is also likely that a court would conclude that Officer Lowry did not have the authority to employ a drug dog at all, as the Minnesota Supreme Court held in the Wiegand case that in order to lawfully conduct a narcotics detection dog sniff around the exterior of a motor vehicle during a routine traffic stop, quote, "a law enforcement officer must have a reasonable, articulable suspicion of drug-related criminal activity." In the 1996 case of U.S. versus Lattimore, an individual argued to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals that his consent to a search of his vehicle was involuntary when the officer threatened to utilize a drug dog if he refused to consent. Although the court ultimately rejected this argument because the individual gave consent to the search before the threat was made, it noted that because the officer did not possess reasonable suspicion, the officer's assertion that he would call a drug dog to search the vehicle if the driver refused consent, quote, "would raise serious questions concerning the voluntariness of his consent." In this situation, although Mr. Pouncil would have a robust argument that his consent was not voluntary due to Officer Lowry's threats of calling a canine, given the low standard that prosecutors must meet in order to prove that consent was given voluntarily, it is certainly possible that a court would reject this argument and find that his consent was still valid.
I just want to make sure it's unlocked.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we're just about done here, man. Last question. The like the bag of pills, or whatever it is. Like I was in the, I think it was
Vitamins?
the gym
Or,
bag.
yeah,
What kind
vitamins.
of? Do you know what kind of? What, like,
No, I
brand
don't.
name
You
they
can
are?
take them if you want.
I don't want to take them. I just want to know, you know, like the brand name.
I don't
for
know.
them? And what kind of vitamins are they?
Just vitamins.
No idea what kind of brand name they would be, or.
No, I do not. You can take them if you want, man. You can get them out alone. There's nothing wrong with it.
Well, I don't want to take anything from you. It's not any. You know. All right, man. I'm not gonna worry about it.
You got a card on you?
I do.
Thank you.
Do you want me to try to explain it to you anymore right now? Or you just...
Let my attorney contact you guys.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
No.
All right. Have a good rest of the night. You're free to go.
You too.
No taking, nothing like that, all right?
After searching the vehicle and finding nothing but some vitamin C capsules, Officer Lowry allowed Mr. Pouncil to leave. According to the police report, Mr. Pouncil was detained for just under 35 minutes. Mr. Pouncil's nephew contacted me about this interaction, informed me that Mr. Pouncil and his family have contacted the city of Bloomington, the Bloomington Police Department, and the city attorney for the city of Bloomington about the incident. However, all three have declined to find any wrongdoing on Officer Lowry's part or take any other corrective actions. Overall, Officer Lowry gets a C- because although he did not escalate the situation to a physical altercation, he illegally extended the traffic stop without reasonable suspicion, punitively required Mr. Council to stand outside in the cold when he wasn't quote-unquote cooperative enough, and manipulatively obtained consent by threatening to make Mr. Council wait for a drug dog that he didn't actually have the legal authority to use. From the beginning of the traffic stop, it was clear that Officer Lowry was looking for any reason he possibly could to search Mr. Pouncil's vehicle, most likely hoping to find drugs or some other sort of contraband, and, as such, he treated Mr. Pouncil like he was a criminal who was hiding something throughout the encounter. These sorts of police interactions not only erode the community's faith in law enforcement, but also make the citizens that officers are supposed to protect feel marginalized, disrespected, and alienated from their own local governments. Officer Lowry would do well to remember that not every citizen he encounters is a criminal, and I would encourage him to review the boundaries of his authority and when he is lawfully permitted to extend a traffic stop because he thinks someone is quote-unquote suspicious. Mr. Pouncil gets a B+ for maintaining a relatively calm and respectful demeanor throughout the encounter, challenging Officer Lowry's invasive questioning and orders to stand outside in the cold, and filing complaints with the local government after the interaction. Although Mr. Pouncil could have exercised his right to remain silent more effectively, and he ultimately consented to a causeless search of his vehicle, Mr. Pouncil is not an auditor, and I can understand why he agreed to let Officer Lowry search his vehicle given the extreme weather and Officer Lowry's threats to make him wait even longer. That being said, it should be noted that Mr. Pouncil's ability to challenge Officer Lowry's actions has been somewhat diminished by the fact that he gave consent to search the vehicle. If Mr. Pouncil had refused to give consent and Officer Lowry had made good on his threat to bring a canine unit, Mr. Pouncil would only need to prove that Officer Lowry did not have the reasonable suspicion necessary to do so. However, since he eventually agreed to the search, Mr. Pouncil must rely on the argument that his consent was not voluntary, and although it has legal merit, the case law supporting this proposition is much weaker and less established than the case law about drug dog sniffs without reasonable suspicion. This interaction demonstrates the importance of refusing to consent to searches, and how individuals can limit their ability to challenge an officer's actions if they waive their rights during an encounter. Let us know if there is an interaction or legal topic you would like us to discuss in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out my second channel for even more police interaction content.